Hey, what's up? So in this series I will create a simple to-do list application with React and Redux. The main idea behind this series is to understand Redux more, and eventually after creating that to-do list application we will go and look at side effects and things in Redux with React. So we will call some APIs and get data from them. But we will start simple and I will build this with you step by step. I won't be explaining every single thing. I don't think this is for beginners as well. So to start, what I did is I ran npx create React app, then I give it my application name, and this is actually, let me clean my terminal. So I called it react-redux YouTube. Then after this finished, I cd'd into that and I installed these packages. So Redux itself, so this is the Redux library itself. If you don't know it, I believe you should know the basics, but this is the state management library. It basically will have a global object, we will call it store, and other entities, components, call them whatever you want, will get data from that global object, and that's it. We have RSuite. This is a very awesome UI library for React. Not a lot of people know about it, but I really liked it. And now we have React and react-redux. This is the library that integrates React with Redux. Because Redux is a standalone library, you can use it anywhere, but you can use it with React by using this library. For Angular, if you want to use it with Angular, we have ngrx. So this is the implementation for Redux, but for Angular it uses reactive programming. We have also Vuex. This is the same thing. It's Redux for Vue.js. Yeah, so basically it's just a global object that all our component will talk to it. This solves a lot of issues. The main one is that when you pass objects to children and then to children and then to children, and you need maybe to contact the main parent, I mean, it's really annoying. So this, if you have a global store, global object, they all can talk to it. It's really easier. The communication is really easier. Another thing, caching. Sometimes when you go and fetch some data, you will retain it. If you store it inside the global object, if you return to the original place, for example a tab, you don't need to load this again because it's already in the browser, in the Redux store, right? You don't need to load it again. So yeah, that's actually two main reasons. So yeah, I did these two things. Now in our source. So this will be like a watch me code, because I still believe Redux is not that easy to explain. But to start, I will create a folder here called Redux. You'll see people call it store, but I will call it Redux. And I like to organize my code by feature, not by type. So you will usually see people create a file called actions, and they will put all the actions here, then types, and they put all the types there, but I will split it by feature. So I will have two folders here, one called posts and another one called to-dos. And this is actually the shape or the keys inside my store. We will have a global object with posts and to-dos. That's why I like to do it like this. Anyone opens my store or my Redux folder will find these two immediately. They will understand that I have posts and to-dos, which is much more easier to understand, at least in my opinion. So in our to-dos, we will create a couple of files. These are usually in each entity in your application. If you want to include it in your store, you will create these three files. So first one is called actions, JavaScript. The second one called reducer.javascript. The third one is called action types.javascript. So the types will be just as strings. So export, const, this will be add, and make them all capital case. So add to do, and this will be add to do, like this, the same token, the same variable name. And another one, I will export it as well. Remove to do. I will copy this and put it here. So if you think about that's the way I think about this, that each to do we can do some actions on top of it. We can add a single to do or remove a single to do. For now, this will be fine. We can only add or remove a to do. So these are our actions. We can know them by strings. And when you have so many actions in your application, there is something called namespaces, and it's just part of the strings at the start between brackets that tells you what entity you are working on. So I'm working on to-dos, so I'll call it to-do. And this visually makes it easier because at some point we will integrate a tool called React Dev or Redux Dev tool. So when seeing these at the beginning of our actions, you will understand, oh yeah, this is for the to-do. Because so many things will start with add underscore or remove underscore. So many things. So yeah, that's it for the actions. Just a string to note what we are doing. The actions, these are the functions that will be called before calling the final thing, which is the reducer. And this function should return an object. So let me import from the action types from the action types, the add to do variable, which is a string, as you can see. Now let me export const add to do. This is a function that will accept a variable I will call arguments. I will call it to do and return an object with a type. The type will be add to do, that is string, and the value I will call it to do. This will be the to do passed to it. And we can actually make this shorter by doing this. So that's it for the actions. Now we need to go to our reducer. Reducer will just return an object that represent a part of the state. So I will create a function. So to do or to do's I will call it. These reducer functions accepts two parameters. The first one is this. We will call it a state. This is the global object itself. It will accept the store itself, the Redux store. And the second argument is the options, and this is actually returned by the actions. So anything your action returned will be available here. So I usually like to destruct them. So I will put the type, or I'll destruct the type and a to do. And yeah, and my to do's in this file will be an empty array by default. So I will create an initial state, will be an empty array, and I will assign it here like this. And I will have a switch statement. I will switch on the type. If the type is equal to the type action, to the action type add to do, so I will import from action types from the action types the add to do. So if that's the result, what I will do, I will return a new array with the original array contact, so state, and I will use the spread syntax. This would get all the elements from this original array and put them one by one inside the new array. Then I will put the to do here, and this will create a, this is actually equivalent to the state dot push the to do, but these are actually equivalent. But the recommended way, or the way you should do it in Redux, is to return a new object, which means you are dealing with data structure as immutable data structures. So don't modify them, return a new ones. This will make it easier for Redux or for React algorithms that capture the changes, to capture the changes faster by treating the data in a mutable way. This is actually the same reason why you are using the use state, or the use state function inside your components, or set state. This one will modify the state in an immutable way, which makes React interact faster with your changes. If you don't understand that, just always retain a new object. Don't retain the previous one. And by default, I will just return the state. Okay, and let's export that. And this initial state, usually all your actions should pass a type, so this default won't happen only at your application bootstrap. So at the first run of your application, all of your reducers will be called. Since there is no type and no to do, all these switch statements will fail and you retain the initial state. So this is why this will work at least once in the start of your application. So now we can actually create a file in our Redux in the root like this, called index.javascript, and in our to-dos also create an index.javascript. I like to export my stuff like this. So let's import from reducers the to-dos, and let's import from the actions the add to do, and that's it. Now let's export these two like this. So to do and add to do. So this is actually equivalent to this. Oops. To this, and this equivalent to this, but this will be a shortcut like this. And what this allows us to do, we can import, just put to-dos, and this will be, or this will read from your index file from here, or you can put this is the same, but I like to do it like this, it's shorter. And this index inside our Redux, we will import anything from our store from this file. So let's import the add to do and the to dos, and let's import at the top Redux. So I'm pretty sure I mentioned this, but this is like a watch me create application kind of video or videos, but yeah. So I'll import create store and combine reducer functions from Redux itself, and I will create variable called reducers. This will be equal to the returned value from combined reducers, and all of our reducer functions, either for to-dos or posts, will be passed here like this. That's the shortcut for that. And the defaulted export will be the returned value from the create store and pass to it your reducers. And that's pretty much it. And as well, I will export a couple of stuff, like I'll export the add to do, and our to do actually will look like this for now: ID, a number, then a text with string. So I'll create like a small class for it, call it model.javascript. So export class to do, I have a constructor, ID and text. So ID, or this.id equal ID, and this.text equal text. And let's export this from here, model, and let's go here and import it and export it from here. So at the end, what you will do, you will dispatch an action. And how you will do this, there is a function from react-redux called dispatch, and this function you will pass to it the returned value from this object, and this dispatch function, after getting this value, it will go and call our correct reducer for that, and this will produce the states, or this is how you change the states. In code will be much more easier to understand, but I believe now we need to go to our index.javascript in our source. This is where our React will be mounted, and here you need to import a couple of stuff. So first thing, we need to import from React Redux a component called provider. A lot of libraries actually uses this kind of stuff, so you'll wrap your application with this component and pass to it something. So you will pass a property called store or a props called store, and this actually will be, so import from Redux, and this will be equivalent to this, so you can remove this. And the default, you can actually import the add to do or the to do model, but the defaulted export is the store itself, as you can see. So you can name it anything you want. You can call it SQQ or I'll call it store because it's a store. So like this, our store is available globally anywhere. So maybe to end this video, I will show you how we can create to-dos and link a specific component with the store. So let's go to our app.cs.javascript, which is generated, and our app.css. Let's move everything from here, and let's go here and remove this. I will actually remove this as well. I will have a main tag, and I will import, since I installed rsought, I will import some stuff from it. So rsought /list, then styles, then rsought default.css. This will import the styles, and I will import from rsought the button. This is actually really easy to use. I like it. So we will have our button. It accepts an appearance. This will be primary for now, and I will call it add to-do list. So whenever this button is clicked, we will add a to-do list application, a to-do list in our global store. But before this, how we can connect this component with our Redux store? There is actually a function to do this from react-redux called connect, and you will actually call it here, and this connect will return a function, and this function you should invoke it again immediately like this and pass to it your component. And this function now is connected with the store. Now to pass data from the store to this component as a props, you will do the following. The connect function accepts two arguments. I will ignore the second one. The first one is a callback function, and this callback function should return an object, and it accepts the state itself. This is the global Redux store state. I will actually log it for you so you can see it. And anything returned in this object will be available as a props here. So let's return something just to prove it to you. I will put my name, and let's get that, let's destruct that like this, and I actually like to do it like this. I don't know, I think this is much more cleaner. So npm start, and we should see the state being logged, and let's also log the name. This is not, I will destruct the name, not the value. Can do that. I'll do like this. Oops. Yeah, I'll do it like this. Hopefully everything is correct here. So let's wait for this one. If we manage to do this correctly, I think the rest is really easy. We can actually yeah, I think the rest is really easy. I mean, my first time doing Redux was really hard, but after multiple times it's got really easy. So let's refresh. We see our add to-do list button. Let's go to our console. We should see that let me refresh. We should see some console logs. So we have our name rewards. This is what is passed here, what is returned here, and this function is called I hope I'm not making a mistake, called mapprops or mapstateToProps. Yeah, mapstateToProps. this function can get anything from the state and return it as a props to this component. Very nice. And anything returned here would be, as like I said, a props for this component. As you can see, I'm displaying the name as an object. This is it, and this is actually our store, the whole state, the whole store. The whole state actually being displayed here. So to-dos are just an empty array object with to-dos key that is an empty array. So if you think about it, if you go to our index JavaScript inside our Redux, these combine reducers, this key to-dos will be equal to this to-dos function, which is our reducer, and this by default the first time will be called when your application starts. The type won't be defined, so the default will be called, and this will return in the empty array. To prove this to you, let me go here, let me turn this to the same thing, right? To prove this to you, I will put this as my name with Z. So wait, as you can see, to-dos are pointing to this initial value. Should be with Z. Yeah, it points to the initial value because the first time it will be called without a type. So I think for so far so good. But now if we have another reducer, for example, we create at some point in this tutorial a posts reducer that talks with an API. We will have a posts key that points to the posts reducer, and we will have now two keys. One to-dos, this points to this empty array, and posts will also point to an empty array. So each reducer will be a key, and each reducer will produce key and value in your global object. So this by default is a global object, and we have a to-dos key, maybe at future posts, and so on. So this is what the combined reducers do. Very awesome thing. This is how you can actually split your store to multiple reducers at the same time. This is how I usually like to do it. So now let's end this by adding an event listener that will create or add to-dos inside our state, global state. Okay, so let's remove this. It's not necessary. It's not required. Let's just return the state, the whole state. Or since this is the state, we can actually destruct from it the to-dos, right? And let's just return the to-dos. We can actually make this really short, like this. And this will be to-dos, like this. So let's console log them. And let's create another function called create to-do. So this function won't accept anything, but it will use a function called dispatch. And when you are looking at tutorials for Redux, you will hear about talking about dispatching actions. So whenever you call this connect function and call the function that it returns from it with this component, the dispatch function is available as a props to this function. So you can actually destruct it from the props object called I'll put it at the start, called dispatch. And this is actually a function. Let me prove this for you. Maybe must return a plain object instead receive dot. I think this should work. But for now, this is, as you can see, this is the dispatch is a function. But what we can do for now is to call our dispatch function with a specific action or the returned value from an action. So let's go to our Redux and let's get the add to do. This is actually an action. So you can see this one, and it accepts a new to do instance. So let's import as well the to do. So let's call the add to do with a new to do. I will pass a 1, then the this is the text, the basics of Redux, and on click this will, oops, this will be equal to this function, and I think that should be it. mapstateToProps is connect app must return a plain object state received. Oh yeah, my bad. This should return an object, right? Like this. This should work now. But we are not logging anything. Yeah, this just return or console log the to-dos. This all should be an array. So as you can see, it's an empty array. Let's now add a new to-do. We have a single to-do in our global store. 3, 4, 5, 6, 8, 7, 8. And these to-dos are available everywhere. That's the thing. That's the main idea. Maybe I can make this make sense more by, let's return this, but before it, or no, let's just have the state here, and to-dos will be equal to state.todos. Now let's console log the state. So the state is to-dos and it's empty. Now let's add a new one. As you can see, to-dos have an array with single element. Now 2 elements and 3. So yeah, that's it. This is like maybe the basics. I will walk you through it again. So Redux is like a global object that we call store, and to modify and to add properties inside this store, we will use something called reducers alongside with actions. And actions are just a simple functions that accept some arguments and return another object, or return an object with a type of property and anything it want with it. Usually people call it payload. Name it anything you want, it's totally fine. And your types should be, or you can do it by defining strings, and each string should be unique, and each action should return a type which is one of these types inside its object. Your reducer will switch on this type. Based on the type, it will do something with the initial state or the previous state to produce a new state. And to create your store, you will use the create store, and you pass to it a bunch of reducers. A recommended way that you should use the combine reducers. Pass to it multiple reducers. Each key will be part of the global store. So to-dos will point to the initial, at the start will point to the initial state here. The second time it will, if you're adding multiple posts, for example, to-dos for example, it will point to the new state for the to-dos. That's it, I believe. It's not, the first time was really hard for me, but for now it's not that hard. But now to contact your store, you will use the connect function, which accepts 2 arguments. The second one we did not talk about. The first one is called mapstateToProps. You will get the state object, and you should return an object that maps the sum of the state properties and return it as a props to the component. So as you can see, I'm returning to-dos, I'm destructing them here and displaying them here, and that's it. How you can connect to tell the store to do something, or to call the reducer function. You will use the dispatch function that have been passed as a props using via the connect function from react-redux. And this dispatch function should have one of the objects that returns by your actions. So as you can see here, I'm returning this object after calling it with the new instance of a to-do class, of the to-do class. So this object will be returned to the dispatch, and dispatch will call our reducer, and then this will happen. We'll return a new state with the already saved to-dos, then add to them the new one. I hope this was useful and not that confusing, but we will continue now creating our to-do list application. hopefully this will be, I think the correct audience for this will be people that already have some experience with Redux, or at least know the basics, or they just want to get familiar with it. So yeah, thank you.